I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, 2 armed Gazans breach the security barrier. The Israeli government heads towards a showdown over a bill to overrule the Supreme Court. And if you've ever dreamed of being an animator, then boy, do we have a story for you. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Twice in one day, multiple Palestinians from Gaza have just been arrested after successfully breaching the security fence and entering Israeli territory. This morning, 2 Gazans were picked up almost immediately after crossing over. They were armed with a grenade and a knife at the time. And mere hours later, 4 more men from Gaza breached the fence. This latest group appears to have been unarmed at the time of the arrest. This is, of course, just the latest in a string of infiltrations from Gaza, and though nothing new, breaches of the border fence have ramped up dramatically since the Hamas-sponsored March of Return protests began nearly a month ago. Though Hamas claims the weekly rallies are merely a peaceful sit-in, Israel sees them as an obvious cover for terror against the Jewish state. Despite this, the army has faced worldwide criticism for its use of live fire against Palestinian crowds, which sometimes number in the tens of thousands in retaliation to firebombing protesters. In fact, these clashes have been some of the bloodiest since the 2014 Gaza war, and at this time, an estimated 39 Palestinians have been killed by IDF gunfire, including 1 Palestinian journalist and a 15-year-old Palestinian boy. Today's infiltrations are widely seen as an extension of this bloodshed. Still, many Gazans have breached the fence just to purposefully be arrested because they see life in an Israeli jail as superior to living under Hamas's rule in the Gaza Strip. Whether or not these suspects intended to carry out terror still remains to be seen. All right, we now have a clearer picture of the exchange of fire that we saw yesterday on the Israeli-Syrian border. The mortar shell that landed in Israel's Golan Heights was apparently spillover from the raging Syrian civil war, but Israel, as a policy, holds the Assad regime responsible for any and all threats to its borders. So in response, the army has just conducted precision strikes on a Syrian military post. The army has confirmed that no Israeli citizens or soldiers were harmed when the mortar struck Israeli territory yesterday. Still, tensions are extremely volatile along the northern border. Russia, Turkey, and Iran have emerged as partners for Syria, forming a dangerous alliance on Israel's doorstep that could open the floodgates for future war. Russia is reportedly even considering putting an arsenal of deadly S-300 missiles into Syria's hands. Moscow has apparently warned Israel of dire consequences if the IDF does anything to disrupt such a handoff. Israel has carried out a number of operations, some secret, some not so secret, within Syrian borders to keep deadly weapons from reaching enemy hands. Russia has been accused of fostering the very power vacuum in Syria that has allowed Iran to gain such a tight foothold in the region, one that places Iranian militants and rockets within striking range of the Jewish state. Even if a war isn't immediately on the horizon, this is certainly a grim prospect that many in Israel see as a lose-lose scenario. All right, Israel's Ministerial Committee for Legislation is now set to discuss a new draft law which, if passed unchanged, could threaten the Jewish identity of hundreds of thousands or more. Here to discuss the highly controversial bill are former head of the Office of the Chief Rabbi of Israel and former lecturer in Jewish law, Rabbi Halpert, and Rabbi Seth Farber, a modern Orthodox rabbi, historian, and the founder of ITIM, the Jewish Life Information Center of Israel. Thank you both very much for being here.
Thank you.
So, Rabbi Farber, I'm actually going to start with you. I understand you've read the draft, so can you maybe just give us a few details of what's in it?
Look, right now there's an incredible problem, demographic problem in Israel. There's 400,000 people who made Aliyah, who emigrated to Israel as Jews. Their entire identity is Jewish. They celebrate the Jewish holidays. They're part of the Jewish ethos here, and yet they're not halachically Jewish. They're registered in the Interior Ministry as no religion. And that's an incredible moral challenge to the state of Israel. This bill sets out to try to resolve that problem by increasing the capacity of the government to help people overcome conversion in Israel. And that should be something we should celebrate. Unfortunately, the particular bill in play right now, the one that has been talked about for almost a year, is not going to resolve that challenge. The main reason is, though it does have some positive elements, it takes some of the power away from the chief rabbinate of Israel. It divests them of some of their authority, which in my opinion is very deleterious to the effort to try to bring these 400,000 people back into the fold or completely into the fold. But on the other hand, it makes the entire issue of conversion a political football. it still will allow incredible heightening of standards that aren't necessary from the perspective of halakha, and they certainly aren't what's called for in today's society.
So, Rabbi Halpert, first of all, how would you respond to Rabbi Farber? And second of all, I understand that you also kind of disagree with this bill, but for different reasons, so we'll get to that after.
I totally disagree with all those kind of bills, because I think, in my opinion, those 4,000 people are not Jewish.
400,000.
400,000. They're not Jewish. It's not a moral problem. They are not Jewish.
We brought them
you
here
cannot convert
as Jews.
Them, you cannot convert them in a liberal way, like the way you want. That's our.
Not only can we are. We've already converted hundreds.
The only institute that can be responsible on the conversion is the Haredi one, because they keep the Jewish law. They have responsibility to the Jewish law. I'm sorry, he's a liberal. He and the conservatives and the reform. When you get a conversion from the reforms or conservative, it's like this paper. Worth nothing. It's nothing.
Rabbi Halpert.
It's nothing. It's
cheating here. The same community you're talking about
totally
denied the legitimacy of the state of Israel before 1948 and since. The same community that you're talking about that benefits from this state of Israel denies its legitimacy. They have no recognition at all for the significance of the religious significance of this moment in history. The liberal Orthodox community is one that is completely committed to halakha, and at the same time,
everybody.
We've converted
400,000. You want to convert non-Jewish? Is it serious? You can do it.
We have converted hundreds.
Hold on 1 second. So my question then, to follow up is again, how then? Who does this bill really serve then, and how will it impact these 400,000 people largely? I mean, because we have to assume that first of all, not all of the 400,000 will be excluded. But how will this really affect going forward the relationship with Jewish people in Israel?
Look, we at Team have been a sponsor of a conversion program called Gior K'Halacha. We've worked together with the Jewish Agency. We've worked together with the World Jewish Community. This bill threatens the very tenuous relationship between Israel and diaspora Jewry. It denies the legitimacy. You heard it just a moment ago. It denies the legitimacy, the integrity of the world Jewish community.
Of course.
There is a solution. And this bill has the capacity.
Who is the Jewish agency? What do they understand?
This bill has the capacity to engage hundreds of thousands of people who are already citizens of Israel and hundreds of thousands more who are part of the world Jewish community. And instead what it's doing is slapping them in the face.
So what I want to ask then is what would the benefit be versus the harm, if you could call it that, of passing a bill as you've, or even any measure as you've suggested we pass it?
I don't mind the harm. I don't mind the Jewish agency. Who are they, the Jewish agency in this?
So let's even say that the
diaspora, all the reforms there, they understand something in the tradition of the Jewish community. I don't want to convert people. I don't want.
One moment. So okay, but again, if you have people who are, so you think we should just get rid of conversions as a process in general? Conversion should not exist.
It can be only very, if you serious cases. It's a serious thing. You cannot take one who serves in the army, non-Jewish, and tell me that he is Jewish. He's not Jewish.
No one is
He's
trying
a good non-Jewish.
No one is trying to say that we should just
convert.
What do you think?
All the world.
No one is trying. I will not convert all the world. I will try. Let's please not go to racism as well.
It's not racism.
It's bad enough that you don't.
That's the problem.
You're not willing to recognize.
You will take them and convert them.
It's bad enough that you're not willing to recognize the integrity of the state of Israel, its religious significance, the opportunity this moment presents for us to bring together the world Jewish community instead,
and to bring non-Jewish people to the Jewish nation. That's your desire.
People
so what are you talking about?
Committed. People who are committed
you want
to the future.
You want to intermarriage.
Rabbi Farber, 1 moment.
We will be intermarriage.
I'm trying to prevent intermarriage.
It's terrible to hear.
I'm trying to prevent intermarriage.
One moment. So, okay, my absolute final question, because unfortunately we'll have to move on. So, Rabbi Halpert, very quickly, if you get what you're saying, that the Haredim will have full control over the conversion process. Do you really think that that won't do more harm than good? Do you think that'll do more good for the country?
It's not my calculation.
For the country?
My only calculation is the benefit of the Jewish law, the Jewish nation, the Haredim, the tradition, the Jewish tradition.
Think about what the Jewish nation is.
Against the Jewish tradition.
No, think about the Jewish nation. Think about the Jewish nation for just a moment.
It's nothing.
The halakha,
nation
and I am very committed to the
come
halakha.
in the Jewish tradition at all.
There was never in the history of the Jewish people, never in the history of the Jewish people did one group, especially one extremist group, control the gates to who comes into the Jewish people, and that certainly shouldn't be the case today.
It was always the case. Always.
All right, well,
all
never.
the Jewish history.
Never.
There were only
not in the times of the
in the Jewish history.
Yes,
only
and I'm sure they all look like you as well. They all wore black hats and streimels. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I appreciate the vigor of this conversation. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for it. So thank you both very much for coming in, Rabbi Halpert, Rabbi Farber.
Thank you very much.
Now, one of the biggest and most controversial bills currently on the horizon in Israel is the government's bid to override decisions of the Supreme Court. The court's override bill was set for a committee vote sometime this week, but now ministers have delayed the vote so that Prime Minister Netanyahu can consult with the head of the Supreme Court, Esther Hayut. Hayut only agreed to take the meeting on the condition that the vote be delayed by at least a week. This controversial legislation, which would change a fundamental cornerstone of Israel's basic law, has quickly become the most heated subject in local politics. Right-wing proponents say the bill is necessary to clip power away from the courts, in cases where courts find certain Israeli laws unconstitutional. Critics, however, point out that damaging the balance of government between the judicial and legislative branches potentially destroys Israel's ability to function as a democracy. Though this bill itself is nothing new, it's picked up steam as of late in the wake of the court's decision to block Israel's plan to forcibly deport nearly 40,000 African asylum seekers, mostly Christians from Eritrea and Sudan, from the country. Members of the judicial branch obviously are against any laws that take away power from the courts. Still, Israel's Attorney General says he could see himself supporting the bill if it required a 70-50 majority from the Knesset to overrule laws. The head of the court is likely to prefer an 80-40 majority vote. Right-wing leader Naftali Bennett, however, says only a 61-vote majority should be needed to override a court verdict. Bennett has threatened that unless his version of the bill isn't passed within 10 days, his Jewish Home Party will even abstain from all future coalition votes. Well, the latest polls are in, and they suggest that if elections were held tomorrow, we could be in for a bit of a shakeup. As previous polls predicted, Netanyahu's Likud party still remains strong, though today's polls do show Likud losing 2 seats. The main opposition party, Yesh Atid, would almost double from 11 to 20 seats, but the biggest surprise of all comes from a new political party that doesn't even have a name yet. LTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the analysis. Brett?
Thanks, Aaron. So it looks like, we have a wild card on our hands in the next elections, maybe. Oli Levy's unnamed party just scored a very impressive 8 mandates in today's polls. Now let's do a little bit of math in this one. So that would place the current coalition bloc at 60 chairs versus 52 chairs on the opposition, which means that these 8 seats would literally make or break the next government.
I mean, yeah, obviously the big question here, though, on everyone's mind now then is, which way will she go? Which way will Levy go? To the right with Netanyahu or to the left as an opposition to Netanyahu?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough to predict. Levy is a really interesting politician. She was initially a member of Defense Minister Lieberman's, very, very right-wing Yisrael Beitenu party, but she actually left that party 2 years ago because she felt Lieberman had kind of sold out their agenda to help, the underprivileged in exchange for forming Netanyahu's coalition. Now, I've looked into her history, and to that end, she's spearheaded a lot of efforts, often gaining support on both ends of the spectrum, specifically to help the poorest communities, helping children, helping improve the housing crisis. In recent votes, she has tended to vote with the opposition, but really it's hard to say which way she'll go, left or right, if she, if these are right estimates.
So, I mean, yeah, it sounds like Levy is also a seasoned pro in the government. I mean, her father was Israel's former foreign affairs minister. Levy herself was actually a model before she kind of followed in her father's footsteps and entered politics. I also know that she's pretty well regarded by most members of the Knesset.
Oh, sure. Actually, when she first announced that she was leaving Lieberman's party, the Zionist Union, I mean, they really lobbied hard to try to get her to join their party. And she's remained a complete independent since 2016, though that itself has come at kind of a cost. As an independent, there's a lot that you actually can't do in the Knesset because of, protocol. But she stuck to her guns and decided to form her own party by her own rules. And I'd say that based on these polls, that's a gamble that might really pay off whenever the next elections do roll around.
All right, well, some are saying, that we could be looking at early elections as soon as the very near future, you know, especially with indictments on the current prime minister still pending. Either way, this will definitely, you know, be interesting to watch play out.
Never boring.
Thanks for the detail, Brett.
Of course.
Sometimes it seems like the Middle East conflict is in an endless spiral of hate with no hope in sight. Well, today we wanted to talk about one incredible man whose life is not only a ray of light in that darkness, but whose work is actually fighting the darkness away. Youssef Haddad is an Arab-Israeli man from Nazareth. He's Christian, but he still volunteered to serve in the IDF's elite Golani unit. He even lost a leg while fighting for his country in the Second Lebanon War. But Haddad's contributions don't stop there. After years of physical therapy recovering from his war-inflicted wounds, Haddad set out to fight for Israel on another front, against BDS. Today, Haddad is a member of Reservists on Duty, a veterans group that combats BDS all over the world and fights anti-Semitism on American college campuses. Now, as if that weren't enough, Haddad's also putting his experiences to use here in Israel. He's now set up an association to bolster ties between the country's Arab minority and the state. It's only through contributing to the state, that Haddad argues, that the Arab population can truly make a difference and improve the country for everyone. That's one of the biggest reasons why Haddad highly encourages Arabs to volunteer for the IDF or even for national service in the first place. For the Arab population, which is exempt from the mandatory army draft, this is still a controversial topic. As a teen serving in the Golani combat unit, Haddad would come home and be called a traitor often by some of his friends and neighbors. Still, Haddad believes that boosted participation from the Arab sector will create a greater role for Arabs in all levels of Israeli society. Nearly 20% of Israel's population is Arab, making it the country's most significant minority by far. So from all of us here at ILTV, Youssef, thanks for all the many battles that you fought and continue to fight in the name of peace. Just like they do all over the world, deadly wildfires destroy thousands of acres of land here in Israel every year. In past years, those fires have even spread so far and so fast that entire towns have had to evacuate their homes. Well, two Israelis, who happen to be twins, by the way, have just come up with an incredible new system to prevent the outbreak of forest fires. And get this, they're only 17 years old. Gilad and Neta Drori have just presented what could be the mother of all science fair projects, a system that could save lives and land all over the world. First, they take real-time aerial landscape photos from either satellites or weather balloons. In some cases, this is before there's even any visible signs of a fire. The photos are then run through an algorithm which uses infrared and ultraviolet waves to predict if and or where a fire is predicted to break out. If one is detected, an alert system immediately calls up the nearest authorities and gets them scrambling to the area in time to put out the flames while they're still small, way before they can erupt into the unstoppable deadly wildfires that we've seen ravage so many landscapes before. The Middle East's dry, sometimes arid climate can often be a breeding ground for fires. One of the worst wildfires in Israel happened just a few years ago, in which 44 people were killed before teams could finally snuff the flames. But now, incidents like that could forever be in the past, all thanks to twin geniuses Gilad and Neta, who presented this new system at the Young Engineer Conference organized by Israel's Technion. Seriously, these kids deserve a blue ribbon. Drones, specifically unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs, include some of the latest and most complicated technological advancements around, and Israel has been no slouch in the market. In fact, a conference on drone technology is set to open just next month in Rishon LeZion, and joining me now with more is co-host of the conference and CEO of Drone Master, Ran Kleiner. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, Ran, first of all, tell me a little bit about this conference that's coming up, and what we're to expect there.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited about it because we are just in the final preparation. It's the Commercial Drone Industry Conference of Israel, and it will be held for the third year. We started early regarding the industry, and it's bringing back all the professional community which actually developing the new technology for drones for the next decade, and it will be dealing with regulations, issues, also.
So speaking of, regulations and challenges that, kind of drive this innovation in this market, what are those major challenges?
Well, regulation, we said, is one challenge that actually need to coordinate many different aspects. It's communication aspects, it's flight safety, it's security issues.
Like zoning and where you can fly legally.
Yeah,
like
you can enter certain areas or not. Who knows where you're flying?
Sure.
Under which, whose authorization? Who is authorized to fly?
Right.
What is the permission required for flight?
There seems like there's a lot more than people
there
really
is also a special
realize.
committee in the Knesset for drones.
Really?
A new one, yeah. Since 2 months ago it was open,
oh, wow.
and the chairman of this committee, member of the Knesset, Chaim Yalin, will be giving the opening speech in the conference.
All right, so I guess finally, tell me a little bit about Drone Master. What is it that your company does, and what will they be presenting at the conference?
We will try to deal with some of those problems. We have developed a system that actually creates real-time situational awareness of drones. It's an independent system that combines hardware and software, and it collects data in real time from the drones, display it in real time, and also analyze the data in real time of many, many drones, regardless of the type of the drone.
So does it turn the drone autonomous?
It doesn't turn the drone autonomous. It doesn't control the drone. It just tells you where it is, what it's doing, and so on, and creates a situational awareness that can be viewed, for example, by air traffic controllers, by the authorities, and then they know where each drone is.
So the applications are, really far-reaching then.
Yeah, drone operators, can, for example, apply for request to fly in real time or before with this system. Another thing we're doing is analyzing the data and providing really useful data that will enhance safety and the efficiency of operating real big fleet, drone fleets.
All right, well, I'm going to advise everybody, obviously, to look up more information about Drone Master because the technology sounds amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Come from the conference.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
With shows like Fauda and Hostages being binged on Netflix, obviously the world cannot get enough of amazing Israeli television. But it turns out that Israel is on the forefront of another entertainment field as well, good old animation. And that's why this year, some of Hollywood's top animators and executives are coming to Jerusalem to lead the 3rd annual Hop, Skip, and a Jump animation workshop. The workshop runs alongside the Jerusalem Film Festival, arguably the most important international film festival in Israel, which hosted Oscar winner Quentin Tarantino just 2 years ago. But the Hop, Skip, and a Jump workshop is a bird of a slightly different color. It's a chance for some of Israel's leading animators to get FaceTime with Hollywood big shots. The guest list includes Jenny Marchik and Arturo Hernandez, 2 top players in Sony Pictures' animation studio. The vice president of Nickelodeon, Ellie Kramer, will also be in attendance, as well as the head of Technicolor's animation team, Stephen Wendland. This summer's workshop has 2 parts. In July, participants will hold one-on-one meetings to collaborate on the art of animation, and 3 months later, another team will return to Israel to consult on actually buying these animations as potential TV shows, web series, or even feature films. Now, while Hollywood films haven't necessarily avoided filming in Israel, the risk of war has typically kept productions at a minimum. Infamously, the hit American series Dig was filming in Jerusalem in 2014 when the Gaza war broke out, which effectively shut down the production halfway through, costing the network millions. Israel's answer to this problem has arrived in the form of animation, which requires the same storytelling tools of filmmaking, minus the nuts and bolts of a physical production. And if there's one thing that we know Israelis know how to do, it's turning lemons into lemonade. All right, and now it's time for our Hebrew word of the day. And if Israeli animators end up creating the next generation of hit animated films, then I guess we'd better learn what to call them in Hebrew. And that's why today's word is seret metzuyar, which means an animated film. Maybe it's done by hand or maybe sculpted with a computer, but either way, if the movie has no flesh and blood actors, that probably means it's a seret metzuyar, or an animated film. Only in a seret metzuyar could you see the hidden stories of toys, kind of like that one seret metzuyar, Toy Story. Some also reveal the world of children, like Miyazaki's awesome seret metzuyar, My Neighbor Totoro. And not every seret metzuyar is for kids. In fact, Israel's most acclaimed seret metzuyar, Waltz with Bashir, is actually a documentary about the First Lebanon War. Speaking of, you should definitely check it out. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight, the heat is finally set to break with cloudy skies and a chance of storms. The low will be around 64 or 18 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow, you can expect strong winds and scattered thunderstorms with a high of about 73 or 23 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.55 shekels for the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for watching.